Welcome to another episode of the Life Sciences Professional Podcast. I'm excited to introduce our next guest, Marcello Napol, who comes to us with vast experience in the medical device industry. He started his career with 3M, where he worked in many different areas within that organization. In medical device, he was in the dental industry. He worked in sales, marketing. I will tell you that he worked in value chain, innovation, supply chain strategy, M&A, and business development. He was in Canada when he started his career with 3M, and then he went to St. Paul and joined the US team. Most recently, though, he joined Ecolab, and he is the Senior Vice President, General Manager of Healthcare North America, where he is in the leading up the healthcare division there in the water, hygiene, and infection control solutions. I'm excited to introduce him. I've known Marcello for a number of years. We're going to talk about what it is in terms of the role of a leader and what they play in creating culture within organizations. Please welcome me and joining Marcello in being a guest here, and I'm sure that you will really enjoy what he has to share. Well, thanks very much, Marcello, for coming. Great to have you as a guest.
Thanks, Linda. Great to be here.
You know, we go back quite a long ways. I've known you for a number of years at 3M when you were heading up the wound care division, and lots has happened over the years since then. And, you know, I know our guests will learn a lot from you in terms of your leadership and what's made you successful. So I'm looking forward to having our chat today. But before we do get into talking about that, if you don't mind telling everybody a little bit about you, you know, professionally, personally, whatever you're willing to share, that would be great.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks. No, I appreciate it again and glad to be here. So thanks for having me.
You're welcome.
This will be fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, just in terms of background, as you know, I'm born and raised in London, Ontario. Went to school there as well. So did both a biology degree and then business at Western IB there in London. And I started work right away at 3M. So I had a progression of roles in marketing, in sales, in key account management, where I started off in our food safety business. Then did a couple year stint as a Six Sigma black belt, where I kind of really started my journey of passion around patient safety and bettering the standard of care as I worked on a project around surgical site infections and orthopedics with the Hamilton Health Sciences team. That was probably still one of the greatest moments of my career, going back now 20 years, of course, but that was a lot of fun. I learned a ton. And then, you know, as you mentioned, then that progressed into the leadership role domestically for the skin and wound business at 3M. And then it was about 13 years ago or so, we moved here to St. Paul. That's part of the St. Paul skyline, our Ecolab building in the background here, to head up a global team and run a global business for 3M in the wound care space that was specific to the skin side of things, skin prevention, skin protection. And then I've had, you know, just a number of different roles in drug delivery, all on kind of the commercial business marketing side of things. So worked a couple of years in drug delivery, loved that role. It was very OEM focused, very customer focused. And then did a couple of year stint over in oral care, started in orthodontics, and then helped to bring that division together all into one global oral care division, orthodontics combined with dental. And then moved back to medical, where my real passion lies, into the med device space, where I worked on an OEM business and then also got to lead our Littman business as well. So it was just a ton of fun. The last 4 to 5 years at 3M were amongst the best in my career. Really loved it. And then, hey, after 27 short years at 3M, decided to move from one great company to another. And 4 months ago, joined here at Ecolab as SVP and General Manager of the North America Healthcare business, and it's been fabulous. Really loving it, loving the culture and the team and the mandate around, really are headed around infection prevention as well. So it's really true to my true north as a person, and a wonderful company as well, which I know maybe we can talk a little bit more about in terms of onboarding later.
Right. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you've been really fortunate. You've worked for, two companies that are very well known as being leaders in their own right. And, we both come from healthcare industry, whether it be like corporate or, what I do now, obviously helping organizations find talent, but, building teams that last is not something everybody is capable of doing. That, finding that recipe, understanding, how to build great team cultures, retain, attract. You do it very well. So we're going to talk about that. But, being in an industry that really helps better people's lives, as you know, I was a nurse before I ever went into sales and leadership roles. So yeah. I haven't wandered too far down the path from my passion either. But one of the challenges as we're moving into 2023 is, all the things that are on people's minds, whether it's, pending recession coming out of the pandemic and, talent shortages, which is going to be a real issue here moving forward in the future. What has stayed the same is the need for talent, right? That's just something that has always been there, but now it's top of mind, right? That people are talking about. I know it's my business, right? That's what I do, is help companies when they can't do it on their own, right? With their own internal resources, but connecting to people, what we need for business to delegate that balance, I guess, is what I'm talking about. But how do you see the future in medical device manufacturing and attracting talent? Like, what are the things that you have to do? The demands in healthcare market and delivery changes. Like, what do you think we need to do to be able to attract these people? We're losing more than we have to be able to define. So what are the simple things that you think you need to do to attract them?
Yeah, it's tough. You asked a question about what stayed the same, what's different. It's so dynamic. Even in the last 3-4 months, I see things shifting a little bit. COVID obviously has been a forced event. The Lisa attitude, life is short attitude. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not judging by any stretch of the imagination, because it's right. I think people have asked the question of what matters to me. What kind of environment do I want to work in? What kind of team and company do I want to work for? These are all big factors. And I think we're going to look back on this period, maybe from like now back 9, 10, 15 months, and say this was a unique period in time from a labor perspective, right? It was very much a seller's market in that regard. I think it's going to shift a little bit here, and the balance of power or leverage will go maybe more to the industry side, but it doesn't change what's happening. People are looking for opportunities to work somewhere, again, where it aligns to their personal beliefs, maybe enables a better lifestyle. People are they've just acknowledged that 24/7 work, we're all wired, doesn't line up to what they want to do. They're calling their own shots in terms of location, and there's a balance here, in terms of what the company needs and wants, what creates effective teams that deliver results, and trying to align to individual needs and wants as well. So it's challenging. I think, from a company perspective, you could try and make an attractive environment. I think, you can't force culture, but at the same time, togetherness, I think, is something that breeds culture. And so that's something you've got to try and figure out a balance on, is how do you co-locate people, but not the way we used to. The days of Monday to Friday, 8 to 5 are those days are gone. So how do you try and build an environment to concentrate people around the team because, as good as we can all be virtually, it's not the same. That spark and that magic that happens at the water cooler or the coffee canteen, those happenings that, in the elevator, they can't happen virtually. It's not organic. And so we just got to figure out that blend and make it attractive, because that's for sure what people want. I think for a while, maybe there was an overcorrection where people thought, oh, I'm happy never to go into the office again. I'll just speak for myself and say it was cool for a while, but not satisfying long term. And so just trying to figure out that balance for folks, knowing that, there's like 20, 30 different personas out there. It's not a one size fits all. You must be in 3 days sort of mentality. We all have to adapt and figure that out and make it attractive for the right kinds of candidates. And then last thing I would say is there's maybe a cooler opportunity, which is to say, you don't have to have all your talent co-located either. Looking and scanning the broader environment geographically is an opportunity, because it is tough to find talent right now.
For sure. And it's interesting. You said not one size fits all, right? And I think that's what's important, and being open-minded, right? Looking forward in terms of, what are the roles you're trying to fit? For if it's logistics, operations, marketing, inside sales, outside sales, senior leadership roles, each individual specific contributor roles need to be looked at differently. And what's your business, and how big is your business in terms of the growth trajectory that you're on? All of that needs to be taken into consideration. And also, are you able to attract the talent you're looking for? Is it A talent that you're getting? And if you're not getting that A talent, what do you need to do to adjust to be able to get the people that you need in order for you to grow the way you want to grow? And if it's not working, fix it, right?
For sure. Yeah. We're fortunate here where I sit, because we're in sort of a med device alley with a lot of big players in town. So you can find some of that talent locally, but if you have a specific skill set need, say something around like, GPO management or experience, like, you've got to look out beyond your city boundaries and think, okay, it's okay to have someone in North Carolina or Toronto or wherever, and just be okay with the fact that you're going to see somebody twice a quarter instead of 3 times a week. Figure that out.
Yeah, even being a med device alley, some companies I've had conversations with, just one-off, looking for recruiting, people are wanting to move outside of where it's expensive.
Yeah.
So, they're looking for remote options because they can't afford to live, right? Buy the home, do the things that they need to do for their families. So they're looking for external options outside of the traditional where everyone used to be. So, how do you address that?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I think it's opportunity, actually. I mean, we sit here. I think we're kind of lucky here because cost of living here is relatively inexpensive compared to most of the country. It's not San Francisco. It's not Greater Toronto area.
It's not Chicago.
Not Chicago, New York. Yeah. So I think we're kind of lucky in that regard. You've got other challenges, which are, do people want to live in a cold northern climate? And that tends to self-select, which is to say, we've got to be flexible if you're looking for that skill set and look beyond your boundaries. You just have to. That's going to be the modern world. I think we have to be adaptable.
Exactly. Now, we were talking, I guess it was in the last couple months, for sure, we've been talking about this, but you have built teams that you've been very successful at building and engaging them in your strategy, your team culture, vision, and blending. And some of that, you talk about building trust and being an authentic, engaged leader. Can you expand on that, and share what you mean by that? Sort of how you've gone about building great teams and, not just being a leader and just, spouting out your vision and here's your strategy and here's your KPIs and let's go at it. You do more. And I know that you do that by being engaged and you're a people person, so that's really helpful. And some people try to do that, but how important it is to be authentic. Let's chat.
Yeah, I mean, you have to adapt to your own strengths and weaknesses a little bit, right? So I think for me, the way I learn the business and the way I think I can contribute to the business is by engaging. So for me, it's organic, right? I'm a customer-focused individual. So, here in 4 months, as part of my onboarding, there's the on paper what you should do, and then there's the reality of what actually happens as you get into the storm. It would be easy never to leave head office because you're just so tied up in administration and getting caught up and learning people, learning new culture and teams and everything. But I try to make it a priority for me. So, co-travel in the field, getting out in front of customers, seeing the realities of the conversations that are happening in head office and how that manifests at the sharp edge of the knife in front of the real customer, both good and bad. Same for manufacturing and logistics. Is no big surprise. Anyone in this industry, anyone in any industry, is facing career level challenges in supply chain, continuity of supply, cost, back order, just broad profitability. Everybody I talk to in the industry, whether it was my old company, my new company, friends and colleagues in other companies, it's the same issue. And so just showing up, I think, sends a signal in and of itself. Being yourself, being authentic, being inquisitive, and just trying to listen, for me, helps, I think, to build credibility and making sure that you're delivering very selective messages without being overly prescriptive early on, I think is a key for me. And I think it's paying dividends already for me, as I see it, and just, showing up. The other side of the coin is, hey, there are people who just aren't built that way. And if you're really good and you have some high EQ, you are able to understand that it's just not natural for you. And so sometimes you might have to lean on somebody on your team who has those skills and capabilities and say, this is really important. So you still have to show up and understand, but it might not be as organic for you. And I think the really good leaders will understand that gap. And I don't want to say assign, but lean on the team and really build a team of people like that, so that you can collectively get there, even if you can't do it yourself as an individual.
And those are really good points, because even, when you start out your career as a sales rep, right, they teach you that, they coach you to be, curious, to be engaged, not to be afraid to go to your customer and ask them to teach you, show you the ways, go to the top reps, do that. And that should be something that you take with you along your path, right? Just as you have in your leadership roles. You've never forgotten that lesson, right?
Yeah, when I was young in my career, I used to think things like self-awareness and, reading the room and those kinds of things were a little fuzzy. Yeah. And then as you get on in time, you realize how critically important they are. How you run into other leaders. It's, I always tell my kids this, learning through the failure of others, observing people, and you're like, ooh, I never want to be like that. and but the ones with the lowest EQ, the ones who they just don't understand the impact they're having in the room. They can't read how other people are reacting. They don't have those side conversations to really understand what was going on in there. I think those are the people that they may not fail from an execution perspective, but they're going to fail from a leadership perspective.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Great point. You recently transitioned from 3M, obviously, like we discussed, to Ecolab, but and you were saying, it's been relatively smooth. You've been, happy with yourself in terms of it was a little bit easier than you expected. And from, the lumps and bumps that sometimes we feel when we make a change, right? But, what would you attribute smooth transition to?
I don't know if I'd say it's been easier than I expected. It's been hard.
Well,
Yeah, I'm tired.
it
I'm
won't be
tired.
super
It's
easy, I'll
4 months.
say. Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
No, it's been awesome. I think the first thing that happened, just in terms of like deciding to move, um, it's a big change for me. It's just, again, how I'm wired. I had an inside scoop, a former colleague who had worked there with the team, and he gave me a lot of reassurance that the fit was awesome. You and I have talked about fit a lot,
Yes.
and I'm a big believer. And one of my big takeaways here after just a few months is it's amazing, after having spent literally a whole career somewhere else, is that culturally, just operating style, I almost feel like it's a better fit here at Ecolab than it ever was at 3M, which is really cool for making such a big decision. And I'll give full marks to the Ecolab leadership coming in. They had a really robust process, really kind of set me up for success, lining me up with a perfect mentor who has been awesome. Thumbs up to Nick Alfano, just a great guy, bringing me on board. Just, a zone of safety to talk about things, as well as a peer buddy, and Greg Peelman, just a lot of things, and access to the senior leadership levels. It's just a very collaborative, warm, welcoming culture. And I think, they know that healthcare, there's a lot of parallels here to the old 3M experience, but healthcare is a unique body inside an industrial Fortune 500 conglomerate. And so they know that they need to blend in that expertise with that company legacy. And so far it's been really, really wonderful.
That's great. Yeah. And, there's a lot of times organizations don't really understand fit and what that fit really means. What does it mean to you?
It can mean a lot of things. I think sometimes it can be just a role fit, like, hey, we've got a great person and we just put them in a job they didn't deserve, didn't want, stretch assignment. And, sometimes we got to be careful about throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Right.
I've done that before in my career. I had a gentleman working for me, and he was in a role and in an industry that just wasn't lined up to his core inner beliefs. And to my knowledge, that individual is still working at 3M. That's like 20 plus years ago. He was just in the wrong spot. Mm-hmm. Totally. We could have made a hard call and said, you're underperforming, let's performance manage you out. Instead, it was just an honest conversation about, let's all agree this isn't working for us, but you're a valuable employee with a lot of transferable skills. Let's move you on. So that's kind of one example I can think about. But sometimes there's a timing element too, Linda, in terms of what does the organization need? And I remember having this conversation leading up to coming here to the Ecolab in the recruiting process. It was really about, where is the team at? What kind of leader do they need? And that's where, we both kind of agreed that that there was this fit equation going on in terms of my style and what the team really needed and where it was at in its maturity phase and sort of development juncture as a business and as a team within Ecolab. So those are big pieces. I think there's a diversity element here that you have to be careful about too, and that is, obviously, some people equate fit to like a homogeneous team, like, hey, we all look the same, we all think the same, and you got to be really careful about that, right? Like, it's, there's the uppercase D diversity, and then there's more diversity of thought. And I think that's one thing for me I've tried to really be self-aware on, is trying not to choose people who are too like-minded, to really be okay with diverse thoughts and pushback and that sort of thing. So you can have fit, but you got to be careful not to build a team who's all looks the same, feels the same, thinks the same, has the same experiences, right? Like you and I talked about that relative to Salesforce. Is like, you can't just have all ex-clinicians to sell into medical or healthcare, much like you can't have all just career sales professional hunters do the same. So you got to think about a hybrid type of environment and team.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that we talked about that in terms of, diversity. And that was actually going to be my next question, is to just chat a little bit about the diversity. And, that's a key topic right now, like organizations being focused on building a diverse organization and making sure that they're cognizant of that. But, really understanding, what does diverse mean? And you and I have had these conversations about that. And to your point, that there are some intangible things that you need to think about. And part of what you were alluding to, where if you're so focused on that and not really looking at what the business needs, and not looking at, are you building the right complement of your team and how that can impact your business? And it's really not the right team that you just built. So do they work well together? And maybe you can expand on that conversation that we had around that in terms of that team that works well together or doesn't work well together, and what the negative impact or positive impact can be even on that.
Yeah, there's I mean, this is a serious onion to peel back, lots of layers here for sure. There's a lot of root causes, just thinking about diversity and inclusion as a mandate, it's super important, right? Almost every large, small company is underperforming in this regard, including our own. You've got to push and make it front and center so that people are aware, and people like yourselves, internal recruiting teams, bringing the right candidates. But then you get to, do you have an environment that's attractive for a diverse and inclusive crowd to want to apply to your company from the outside? Are you creating that kind of environment of inclusivity? And so, it's a tough one. But even inside the company, and get to another level of that, as we talked about, is diversity of experience. Like, it would be easy for us in healthcare here at Ecolab to say, oh yeah, we want only industry people. There's a lot of benefit to bringing in people from other parts of the company, whether that's institutional, industrial, water, you name it, because they have other processes. They speak the language of the company. They know how to leverage what I call the middle of the company, those core competencies, to make ourselves better and to fight above your weight class. That's the big company division game. You're trying to extract resources where you don't have them to be better. So you really have to figure out that hybrid blend, even within the company, and that's a different definition of diversity, but it's one I think about too.
Right. And I've been recruiting 20 years plus, and one of the things that's been important to us is to help organizations look outside their norm so that they could be more diverse. We've been doing diversity way before that was even a thing.
Yeah,
right. Totally. Yeah. And, it builds great teams because it helps us think differently. It helps people, it's a better work environment just to sort of change that culture, bring new skills, bring different industry thought processes, right?
Yeah, and it's so hard when you're inside a company because you're always under budgetary constraints, you're under time constraints, and you have someone surprise leave you, especially today. You get these surprise resignations, and they're really impactful, and you want to backfill as soon as possible. So there's a level of timeliness and desperation to say, oh, we better backfill that rec while we have the approval, first of all, before, I'm not talking about, this is just general, before the company yanks it, before budgets get tight, before sales are not high enough, all of those games that every publicly traded company goes through. And so you want to move fast, and then you realize that your candidate pool comes in and it isn't diverse, right? So it's part of that challenge of having the courage to say, we're going to push back. We're going to get a more diverse slate, and then choose the best person for the job.
Right.
But you got to start with that root cause piece of, being an attractive company, having the right kind of culture of inclusivity, and then making sure you got the right candidate pool, and not being okay with just an okay candidate pool.
Yeah, exactly. But I also think, and I don't know if you've experienced this or not, but I don't know that anybody is really, whether it be a large organization, medium or small, if they're really looking at what's happening, what the cost is, if they wait to find the ideal candidate a week later, a month later, 6 weeks later, because being in a hurry to hire a candidate with industry experience versus waiting a little bit longer to find a higher producer, a better performer, and what the results you gain hiring that individual. Nobody's really looking at that.
It would seem to make a great article in the making, Linda. I'm with you 100%. And then there's another element to that, which is just think about it. How many times have I had this conversation inside the company, talked about it with colleagues and friends who work in this industry and others? It's like, well, I have so-and-so on the team, underperformer, but I'd rather have them than nobody sort of mentality. And that's just, it's so common.
I know.
And you're not going to have a team of all-stars. That's just the law of averages. The old mantra of trying to get top 20, sort of the middle 70 and a lower 10 demographic on your team of performance. Okay, that probably holds true, relatively speaking. So you're just never going to get there, but man, you got to make some tough calls. And it can be so demoralizing to the team to choose the wrong person, number one, and to stand pat and have an underperformer on the team. It's just it just drags people down because everybody knows it. So it's super tough in this environment where getting requisitions for hire is challenging. As I said, I think I'd be shocked to find any company that's not under a profitability strain. Everybody's doing comparables back to pre-COVID. It's tough. It's really tough.
When you think about it, the cost to hire, whether it be your internal recruiter or an external recruiter to find you somebody, whether it be $5,000, $10,000, $20,000, whatever it is nothing. It's peanuts compared to the lost revenue that you are experiencing with somebody. And I think one of the reasons I started to recruit, and as you know the story, I didn't recruit initially. I was helping companies build performance cultures. Recruiting came 6-7 months later. But one of the reasons I agreed to do it is because I remember so well when I was a rep and a manager, having people on our team that weren't performing. I remember thinking it wasn't logical, it made no sense to me. And everyone was complaining, everybody knew it, just like you said. So why would you do that? So it was just, to me, it was a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, well, and I mean, it could just be, there's a process discipline, there's an expertise. It's hiring is tough. It's super. Hiring from the outside in particular, usually inside a company, you can call a friend, you can get the real scoop if you're savvy. Always shocks me that people don't call other people to ask, but your risk level is significantly lower on internal transfers and hires, I think. Outside, man, I'm telling you, it's tough. If you're not getting somebody with trusted, known references, like, hey, Linda, I can call you and I'm going to get the scoop on, Jane Doe, who you used to work with 4 years ago, and you're going to give me a huge thumbs up. If you don't have that trusted reference, it's a gamble. It's a real big gamble.
Yeah, it is.
And we know it doesn't always work out. I'd be super interested to know and track that. Maybe you have some insight, but what does that look like in terms of key hires and failure rate or success rate, and how do people measure that? It's a big challenge.
Well, I have a client actually that we've worked with for, I think, 12, 14 years. It's probably closer to 14 times flying. And they don't do references ever. They think they're bogus. They don't do them. And I can't remember how long ago they stopped doing it, but they've got the highest retention rate of all of our clients.
Seriously.
Yeah. Anyone we place in there, it's rare they leave. Like it's wild. But for a couple of reasons. One is they know their blueprint. They know what they're looking for. We know what they're looking for. And they interview well. Once we've done it, they interview well. They onboard them well, right? Which is key too. And away they go. They don't check references.
Yeah, well, I think there's something to that.
Yeah.
Having been part of, now both sides of the interview process, interviewing is a skill. And there's a fine line between sort of the combative, panel high pressure interviews and just some really good, tough, challenging questions. Not to be adversarial, but to really get to those levels of depths to understand how deep does this person go, right? Because I don't want to say it can be easy. People can be good actors.
You betcha.
Picking up terminology and dropping buzzwords, making up stories, you can do it. And so it takes a pretty good degree of skill to really pick away at that as an interviewer and go those levels of depths required to really understand, is this person who they say they are, and more importantly, who we need.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? And I think, the point you just made is a skilled interviewer and asking in-depth questions, like not just walk me through your resume, walk me through what you've done. Like, tell me a little bit about that. You really have to get into their life in terms of their work life and what they've previously done in this skills and stuff and delve into it. And the hiring managers need to take ownership of hiring, right? They need to take ownership for the person that they're hiring and make sure that you want that person on your team. Ask the questions.
And back to the real world scenario. What don't you have time for if you're a busy leader? You don't have time to interview. So it's like, well, you get hey, I've seen this movie 100 times. It's like you have the queue of candidates, you have the resumes, someone has inserted the resume in the meeting invite. So it's like, if you don't spend the time, to your point on ROI or risk, you don't spend that time up front in preparing for that interview, dissecting that person's background in advance of that conversation, having really pointed questions. You need to standardize for sure, because you want to be able to compare and contrast, but you really want to pick that apart. But it's like most things in life, preparation is more than half the battle. You got to be ready for that. And it's a challenge because you just don't have the time.
Yeah, absolutely. But part of it is that investment up front. If you have really good people, what does that translate into at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, totally.
Your life is easier. And I learned that early in my management career after, a few bumps and lumps. But once you have good people on your team, they're taking on tasks off your plate. You're making your numbers, your headaches go away. It's like all of those things, right?
Yeah, and then you and I referenced it earlier that and then that onboarding process. So so you think you've got the right person, and then how do you set the person up for success, right? And big companies, small companies, whatever, everybody's terrible at reinventing the wheel. And if there's one thing I learned from my, as I say, I'm a recovering black belt. Standardization leads to better outcomes. It's like, we've done this. Let's build it. Like, let's copy this as a template, as an idea, as a process, and let's copy paste for the next person. Like, let's learn from what we did. Plan, do, check, act. But it should just be a template. Like, what do we have to do? What are the things you want to do as you onboard? Who are the people you need to meet with? You can't take that lightly, because it's just going to. In the upfront phase, when people aren't valuable yet, that's the time when you need to give them the experiences and force them to have the right conversations with the right people to set themselves up, that foundational build for the future.
Exactly.
Super critical.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But it's interesting how often there isn't really that formalized, like there's a couple weeks or a week long. But in medical device, I was reading a study, and I should look that up and post it on my website. But there was a study that said in medical device, it's 12 to 18 months of onboarding is what's necessary in sophisticated business. So
sure. It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, 12 to 18 months onboarding. Yeah. So I thought that was pretty reasonable. And some, you think of some of the business that is in medical device, I could see it myself. And it doesn't mean that they're not off and running within, a short period of time at the company's onboarding, but they were talking about ongoing onboarding, where there's touch points, there's continuous training before they are truly impacting the business full on in 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, I mean, we take it for granted maybe because we've been in the industry for so long.
Yeah.
It's terminology, it's understanding, it's real world failures, it's all of those things. And healthcare med device, it's just different. And so, think about, even if you bring in somebody who is a skilled leader from another industry, and our company is a great example of that. It can take quite a long time to get comfortable with that and really to help deliver. And so you're not just, you got to get beyond just being a leader and a manager to a contributor. And I would agree, it's challenging without that depth of experience. And,
right. Yeah, it's quite a period of time. And if I were to ask you, as a leader in healthcare today, what are the top 4 things that you'll focus on to ensure you drive growth moving forward next year? What do you think?
This should be an easy answer because I just delivered it internally. First off, it's around profitable growth, and I think just focusing the team on the key parts of the portfolio that make sense for us and that drive the greatest value, which is tough. Every organization I've ever been part of, every study you ever read, the last thing that people are good at is prioritization and focus, and those are kind of yin and yang together. So I think for me, that's one of the top things that we collectively are working on, and that I'm going to just be ruthless on with the team, is just saying, hey, these are the pieces we want to work on, both tactically here short term and then strategically to build for the future. So that's a big part of it. I think, supply chain manufacturing excellence is another big piece. It's just, I always joke to friends who are in the discipline, it's the worst time to be in supply chain ever. What a almost 3-year period. It's been horrible. And it's getting better in the sense of we're kind of normalizing, I think. But gosh, who knows what's on the horizon? Geopolitics, now China reversing on COVID policy. What impact could that have? Think about how much med device we rely on, not just finished good, but componentry coming from China, RMs, you name it. Shipping container availability, cost, obsolescence. So as companies are going through their prioritization, they're like, well, we don't want these components. We can't make them. They're not profitable. So the surprise discontinuation of raw materials and components, it's stifling. It's crushing. So that's a big focus for us for sure. Is just trying to both shore up the efficiency, effectiveness, but also ensuring that continuity of supply. And then the last is really around the team and the people, the talent management. It's trying to be inspiring, trying to build the right structure to succeed, and listening to the team for sure, but also sort of encouraging and clarifying what we're doing, and then all that, for me, where you're going to drive success is to wrap that all around the customer. So I've delivered messages to our crew about, working at the speed of the customer velocity, commercial velocity, just thinking about, regardless of your function, that somehow you're working for the customer. So if you're in marketing or customer service, okay, it's pretty tight. Now you're in finance, right? So what line, how connected are you to the customer? Well, if a sales rep is asking you for a question, my guess is they've got some time urgency on the other side of that. So it was early here in my time at Ecolab. There was a CEO town hall sort of session here at headquarters, and I was pretty sure I'd reached the right place when the CEO, and I'm paraphrasing here, he said something to the effect of, there is no back office here. Everyone works for the customer. And I think if you have that mindset, regardless of your function, the team is going to be super successful. So that's kind of more of a thematic element, not so much a tactical one, that I really want us to be working on this year.
And, from a company perspective, that is a great message, because at the end of the day, it's true. Doesn't matter who you are in an organization.
Yeah, totally.
If you don't focus on the customer, you don't have a job. We don't have a company. We don't have anything, right? It's
Totally.
It's bringing everyone back down to grassroots, right? So
absolutely. If we don't have something compelling for them to buy, and they don't give us money in exchange for that, everything kind of falls apart, doesn't it?
You bet. It's exactly right. And one last question: what advice would you tell someone who's aspiring to be a leader that within the life science industry? What would you say to them?
That's a tough question, I think.
Run. Just kidding.
No, I mean, so there's a lot of different ways. I think, some people try and get into the industry because they see it as a checkbox in a career. Mm-hmm. For others, more like me, it's just become part of your DNA and a passion. So I'd say if it's part of your passion, then my advice would be open to a diversity of experiences. And for me, I think, as I think about my roadmap, my career roadmap, it wasn't a roadmap, right? It was a set of chances and gambles maybe that I took, but it was all about diversity of experience. And I started my career in marketing, and then about 7-10 weeks into my sales role, I realized how bad a marketer I was. That's a good example. It's like, oh, wow, I didn't know what I was doing. But those experiences, they serve you so well later in your career, and they can across different business models, whether that's direct to customer, whether it's OEM based, very clinically based. So I think that's my biggest advice to people, is just don't be afraid to take chances. And that can mean, maybe company size, industry, or role. That'd be my best advice. And I think that's sort of generic advice, maybe beyond healthcare or medical, but I think it holds true.
And what about being in a hurry? And the reason I say that is I constantly come across, young professionals who, are anxious, right? They're running out of time.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm always trying to get them to slow down a little bit and understand, like, they got checkbox, and I want to be here and into leadership within 5 years, and that's not realistic. And they've had bad coaching or bad advice. So
yeah,
I don't want to discourage them, but I also want them to understand that there's a learning curve. Just to my point, the 12 to 18 months, it just doesn't happen that fast. It's a sophisticated industry, first and foremost, as are many others. But and they're smart. People are smart, but
it is tough, and it's such a long race. And I can say this now with a couple of gray hairs in the temple. The days of lifetime employment are behind anyone who's coming into the workforce.
Yeah.
I think you just have to have that mindset. It can still happen. There are still great companies out there that might enable that, but because of defined benefit pension plans disappearing and all those other things, and stocks up and down where golden handcuffs disappear, it's less and less likely, right? So I think you have to have the mindset of a lifetime employability. And it goes back to what I said about diversity of experiences. You need to think about your career, and a former CEO at 3M, he used to use this analogy. If you think about your career in terms of maybe more of a quilt patchwork or a mosaic of different tiles to create a picture when you're all done, as opposed to the old notion of company ladder and, and this step to this step to this step to this step. And, I'm going to be CEO by the time I'm 34. Hey, sure, some people do that. I don't know that it's very likely. I also don't know that it's very enriching. And what I'm sure of is that I think from a success on the job perspective, if you just think about it linearly like that, you're going to miss out on some things.
Yeah, I would agree.